You're listening to Major Motion Problems, a podcast that explores the best and worst movies of all time to find out if they deserve their Oscar glory or Razzie infamy. I'm James.
And I'm Kris. Every episode, we pick a year at random and watch the Academy Award winner for Best Picture, along with that year's Golden Raspberry loser for Worst Picture. We will discuss, debate, and determine if the world was right in honoring or dishonoring these films.
This episode, we're in 2015, where Best Picture went to Spotlight, a thrilling recreation of the Boston Globe's 2001 investigation of the Catholic Church's cover-up of widespread abuse by its own clergy.
Well, geez, James, how am I supposed to follow that up with the Golden Raspberry Worst Picture, Fantastic Four? I honestly don't know what to say. Yet again, what a pairing.
There are some corners of the internet that probably believe, well, no, the 2015 Fantastic Four, what that did to superhero movies is as important as what the Spotlight team did in Boston in 2001.
Not even 4 years of film school are going to be able to help us connect these two films because they are so wildly different that I wrote my Fantastic Four intro and I made it as, spoiler alert, as silly and crazy as I possibly could in order to handle the source material. Mm-hmm. And then I watched Spotlight last night and just a totally different... I'm not sure how to express the tonal whiplash that's going on inside me right now.
It's another Platoon Howard the Duck moment for sure. Can I offer something completely unrelated to anything we were talking about discussing this episode? It's just something I remembered this morning.
Sure.
Do you remember in like the mid 2010s on NBC there was an attempt to relaunch The Gong Show? Do you remember this?
Vaguely. So what? Yeah. Tell me about it.
Okay, let's just make this so quick. The Gong Show was like, I think from the 60s, where it was a dumb thing where people would come out on stage and like do their weird talent until like some guy hit a gong and like kicked them off. Okay, so they relaunched it with new host Tommy Maitland. And Tommy Maitland seemed to be an obnoxious British person whose catchphrase was, "Who's a cheeky monkey?" Now, I'm only bringing this up because, and this was the genius of the whole thing, Tommy Maitland was actually Mike Myers doing a character, except they didn't advertise it at all that it was Mike Myers pretending to be an obnoxious British television host.
Wow, really?
And the only reason I'm bringing this up is just sometimes I worry, like, are we too hard on people that gave us joy in other things? Maybe not one thing, but not the other. And yes, the Love Guru is unforgivable, but I do want to give him credit for Tommy Maitland and The Gong Show.
That is, wow. You know who they should have gotten to reboot The Gong Show is Josh Trank, who would have made it gray and boring and quiet.
All right. We can discuss Mr. Trank's work in a moment. I think first, though, we should start with Spotlight.
I know there's things you cannot tell me. But I also know there's a story here, and I think everybody will hear about it.
Do you think your paper has the resources to take that on?
I do. Do you?
Kris, I have to admit I feel a little uncomfortable discussing Spotlight as a film, because whatever its artistic merits are, and it has many, they pale in comparison to the facts that inspired its story. I'm talking about the series of articles the Boston Globe ran in 2002, revealing the Catholic Church covered up decades of child abuse at the hands of their clergy. As Rachel McAdams' Sasha Pfeiffer says in the film, words matter, so let me be clear by what I mean by cover-up and abuse. The Globe's investigative team Spotlight discovered that the Boston Diocese knew about pedophile priests preying on children and had a system in place that allowed them to silence the victims and their families, as well as protect the offenders from facing any sort of real punishment. These priests were usually just reassigned to new parishes, often until they would offend again. No matter what your beliefs, these are horrifying truths that everyone should know, and the film doesn't shy away from showing the toll taken on the victims and their families. After I viewed the film, I felt outraged, depressed, and this is the uncomfortable part, kinda enthralled by the journey.
It's a thriller, and yet we already know the end of the story, so it's a really skillful job on the part of Tom as a director and he and Josh as writers to mete out the information in such a way as to keep the audience on the edge of the seat, despite the fact that you know the ending already.
Yes, Spotlight is a very entertaining movie. It casually sneaks up on you, establishing a hypnotic rhythm as it jumps between multiple reporters all working the same story, and allows each thread to twist and turn freely while still complementing the greater mystery being uncovered. And that mystery, it turns out, isn't a mystery at all. The big, and I hate to use this term, but it's appropriate, twist of the film is that this story was available for anyone to learn decades before this group of characters began to connect the dots. What this film does best is not just target the church's moral failure, but also the failure by the very press that is the hero of this story, as well as the Catholics of Boston, too. This is what a culture of silence creates, when it's too scary to say an institution is failing its members, that its problems are just the work of bad apples, and what happens when those who could do something about it throw up their hands and ask, "What do you want me to do?"
Obviously, the church will fight us very hard.
Trying to get some background information.
I don't want you recording this in any way, shape, or form. Nothing.
We understand you've settled several cases against the church.
I can't discuss that.
There aren't any records of any of these settlements.
Nope.
When you're a poor kid from a poor family, and when a priest pays attention to you, it's a big deal. How do you say no to God?
This is a movie podcast, so I should talk about the filmmaking. It's top tier. From the quiet, tense direction from Tom McCarthy, to the boiled down to the essential script from Josh Singer, to the perfectly calibrated, not too showy, but still memorable performances from its all-star cast. This is a quiet movie, but it isn't a slow burn, not when every scene has at least one character asking a difficult question aloud. It starts with Liev Schreiber's Marty Baron on his first day as editor-in-chief of the Boston Globe, asking his staff why no one followed up on a recent story about the Archbishop being accused of knowing about abuse in his diocese. From there, the Spotlight team starts digging, although they don't have to go very deep. Revelations seem to come out of every conversation they have with priests, judges, recovering Catholics, and even longtime friends and acquaintances who are revealed to have turned a blind eye. At multiple points, the Globe considers publishing what they know, but Barron encourages the team to keep digging and capture the horrifying scale of abuse and prove those in charge have known about it. This push and pull of wanting to do right by the church's victims and not wanting to be scooped by another paper grows bigger and bigger until finally the Globe has no choice but to show the public what it's learned. The Spotlight team celebrates by taking the morning of printing off until their phone lines are flooded with more victims coming forward with their stories. Their work has just begun.
We both became very quickly, I think, pretty engrossed in the subject matter. And at some point, it just became obvious, like, well, we should just write this together.
We found quickly in our collaboration mirrored the reporters' collaboration and their process. And there was something very useful about us kind of investigating this both individually and collectively and kind of constantly banging ideas and thoughts off each other, just like any collaboration.
Tom had this commitment to verisimilitude, to getting the story right. And he made us not only, talk to the reporters more than 2 or 3 times. I think we took 6, 7 trips up to Boston. Beyond that, we reached out beyond the reporters. We talked to reporters who had been involved with some of the earlier investigations with the Porter case at the Globe. We talked to lawyers who the reporters used as sources. We talked to the lawyers that the Globe used in pursuing their legal case. We talked to a number of survivors, Phil Saviano and Joe Crowley, and those conversations, I think, really make the movie come alive.
Should be noted that the script is a dramatization of the investigation, and while many conversations between these characters did occur, the order and timing of events is the work of McCarthy and Singer. Unsurprisingly, some of the people portrayed have taken issue with their depiction, but none of that detracts from the truth of what happened in Boston, nor that this quiet, respectfully told story somehow makes waiting for a public records office to open edge-of-your-seat exciting. This is my second time watching the movie, and I have to admit, it didn't connect with me the first time around on its initial release. Maybe the MCU had beaten my brain into a pulp in 2015, but I missed how expertly constructed and executed this movie is. It's quite the achievement, highly recommended viewing, and the most deserving Best Picture we've covered so far. Kris, what'd you think of Spotlight?
I want to say that I really loved and enjoyed this movie, but those words don't really seem right or fitting for this movie. What this movie did do is move me in a way that I don't think any other movie has moved me before. Usually I'm focusing a lot on like story structure and acting and like shot composition, but there's something about I don't want to say plainness, but the straightforwardness of every locked off shot, letting the actors play in just a couple setups. And everything is focused on the writing, and the writing is focused on this horrible, horrible, awful thing that happened in the United States near the turn of the century. And to be honest, I was crying near the end of the movie just because this is a story that if you grew up in the 90s or the early 2000s, or really any time in the United States, I guess there's only different levels of degree of truth that came out. You are familiar with this story, but you may not be familiar with the specifics, maybe what the specific victims went through, what the people looking for truth went through. And honestly, I don't mean to sound funny, but putting this up next to Fantastic Four, it's almost unbelievable. Again, it's like Platoon and Howard the Duck. It's unbelievable that film can reach such a broad spectrum of emotions, from something genuinely heart-wrenching that makes you look at your life and the people around you differently and how we live as a society. And, Fan Four Stick, which is just so different.
Yes,
what did you think?
Yes. All right. We'll get to Fan Four Stick as soon as we can. But I think you said something very interesting right there, which is, for our generation, we grew up when this was happening, which was, we were about to become teenagers in 2000, 2001. And yeah, this story was on every television news program, in every paper, as more and more information came out. And I don't think, as you said, I really understood the details of it. And I come from a Catholic family. And I don't want to say that we, as a church really grappled, head on with what was going on in Boston, revealed to be in Boston. And then as the end credits of the film reveal, all around the world. But it's hard to believe that something so horrific and such a big story could also be something that almost gets forgotten about in just a few years. And I think that speaks to the power of the church as an institution, but also just personal faith of its members. And that's probably the toughest thing, it's not the toughest, but it's up there, that the Spotlight team comes up against is, in Boston, how are you supposed to go up against the church? That's the first thing that everyone says is, don't bother doing this story because the church is going to crush you. Now, we're talking about an institution that is supposed to be providing, comfort and love and a path for living a good life in hopes of eternal salvation. We're talking about it, though, as if it's like a mob, as if it's like a mob boss going to crush you if you try to go against it. And that just lets you know how scary, or just not even scary, because this film doesn't really play with, anyone feeling threatened or like their lives at risk, at least on the reporter side of things. But it does show how unlikely they were to be, how unlikely it was that they were going to be successful in their investigation and actually prove step by step how the church covered all of this up. And that is just such an incredible achievement. Now, on that note, what Kris, why do you think, what is the power and the advantage of telling the story in a narrative film over something like a documentary where, theoretically, you could do all the same things and be even more factually accurate? Not that this film isn't factually accurate, but just by the very fact that it has probably one of the greatest ensemble casts of all time, doing these lines, there is a dramatization going on here. So any advantages of doing a narrative film over a documentary?
Great point. Honestly, my head is almost divided in saying, this should have been a documentary. However, you're going to have to explain who this filmmaker is to me and what they've done and their style and everything. But there were so many subtle narrative moments that gave the movie infinite more meaning. I'm trying to think near the beginning, maybe it's near the beginning or near the end, where two of the reporters pull up to the Boston Globe parking lot, and you just see the giant AOL billboard hovering over.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Like, when that appeared, I know I can't say awesome in the movie Spotlight, but I was like, that is great visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And there were a few other moments. Like, I was thinking of this from the point of view of a non-religious person. I'm not very religious. I've never been religious. No one in my family has ever been religious. So part of me was thinking the entire time, how is this movie like making this issue, relevant, or explaining it to people who might not be Catholic? It's such a dumb thing to pose, but if you're not religious, if you didn't grow up in a religious family, it may take a little bit of work to explain to you that in Boston, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, probably even today, the Catholic Church has a tremendous amount of power. And that one scene at the beginning in the 70s, I believe, where, the cops are smoking, and I forget, there's a child who has been a victim, and they're just quietly covering it up, and it's like no big deal. Obviously, it is a big deal, but they're trying to make it like it never even happened. And I think that is a solid narrative setup to show the audience, the broad spectrum of everyone in the audience, the Catholic Church has so much power here. And you're right, it's kind of interesting that I think the only real power play that the Catholic Church, in the form of a singular clergy member, puts against one of the reporters is that copy of Catechism. That's like the only moment where the Catholic Church is directly saying, like, don't mess with us. Otherwise, it's through the mouth of charming lawyer Billy Crudup.
Well, but Crudup is taking down the church as well. He's been doing it longer than anyone else.
That is a reveal, though, right, James? I mean, that you don't know that up until that's one of the great parts of this movie, is that I thought he was just another scummy lawyer until it's revealed that he actually tried to do something about this a long time ago, and nobody helped him, and that's why he's put up walls.
And that is something that actually, I don't have a lot of production notes to talk about and how the movie came together, but I guess in the research for the movie, speaking with the real-life McLeish, he revealed that to Josh Singer and Tom McCarthy as they were writing it.
Really?
Yes. So it's like, that's something that scene, I'm not sure if like an exact version of that happened with the real life reporters, or if that was something that just the filmmakers added on top of it. But it was to show, again, that there were all these concentric circles of silence. There were multiple times that the press, that the church, that the Catholics of Boston could have brought this information forward. And they didn't.
Am I getting that story point correct, though? That is a reveal that he actually...
Yes, I think you're getting it correct. But to be clear, McLeish, he enters the film as a high-profile lawyer, very handsome, has a beautiful office full of, beautiful steel and glass office. I love how he only has like 3 scenes, but 2 of those scenes are blocked exactly the same. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's Michael Keaton and Rachel McAdams sitting on one side of the table and Billy Crudup on the other side of the table. It's very clear. It's like, okay, we have the office today. We're going to get both scenes. Just change the wardrobe a little. So they come to him originally because he has been representing victims of the church. However, their criticism of him is that he is settling for easy payouts. He's allowing the church to remain silent, to keep things legally off the books, because these are all like personal matters that don't get reported on. And they keep pressing him to figure out, as opposed to Stanley Tucci's lawyer, who is down in the mud actually suing the Catholic Church, trying to, do the work necessary to take it down. It seems like Billy Crudup is being presented as like the easy out and part of the problem of why this story has never been brought to light. It is revealed, though, that he sent names to Michael Keaton's character back when he was editor of the Metro section. And Keaton, his character, I think is Tom Robinson, I believe is the character's name, or the real life person's name. He either missed the story or actively decided not to do anything with it, which led to another 20 years of this quietly just going on in the background. And that leads to a pretty amazing scene where the staff has assembled, and they have all the information. They're going to publish, and everyone is pointing fingers at each other. You know, we knew about this. You didn't know about this. This is John Slattery's role because he's not involved in the investigation. He's like, he tells Michael Keaton, like, you had this 20 years ago. How could this happen? And it's Liev Schreiber who says, you know, we spend as reporters a lot of time fumbling around in the dark, just looking for any sort of light. And when the light comes on, we don't always like what we find. And it was just a very beautiful way of saying, like, yes, we let some people down in the past, but we're doing the right thing now, and we have to move forward.
You're right. Let me ask you about that scene, because I really, it's hard to say the word loved. This movie moved me in ways that I have not been moved by a movie before. And that scene near the end where you learn that Michael Keaton had the chance to go after the story when he was on the Metro part of the newspaper a long time ago. And I don't want to say it skates right by that story point, but you immediately go into Liev Schreiber, you know, doing that little speech he gives about fumbling around in the dark. What did you make? You know, a different screenwriter would make a big meal out of that story point, probably give more time after it and before it, leading up to that point. Obviously, they kind of plant, you know, the story beat before that, where Rachel McAdams goes into Michael Keaton's office, and doesn't she just lay down like some article that he... What does she lay down again? Remind me. It's article...
It's exactly what you're saying. She lays down the article of when they ran the story in Metro, and they didn't do any follow-up on it. And she goes, this was, you know, this is unsaid, but this was while you were on the Metro, editor of the Metro desk. And Michael Keaton just says, thank you. And then I guess to your point, like how to make more of a meal out of that, the next beat in that story is it's Michael Keaton who reconnects with his old high school friend who was the lawyer that covered up all 70-some priests that were reassigned or sent away to, you know, church-approved therapy. That's when he goes to his house and he shows him the list of names and he circles all the names. So it's, you know, is there a moment where Michael Keaton, you know, throws himself on the fire in front of his staff and says, I know what I did was wrong or anything like that? I don't know. I honestly, like, the very fact that, like, you're being presented with this information and, you know that you are, your hands are dirty in this. It's that realization. I don't know if that moment needs to be much bigger than that. It was effective for me anyway.
That scene near the end of the movie where Michael Keaton goes to the lawyer who was responsible for so many of the cover-ups, that was probably the most powerful scene of the movie for me. Those two scenes back to back where Michael Keaton goes into the house, you know, he's welcomed by the lawyer's wife, everything's fine. And then he just sort of reveals that, like, I have it all figured out. I have all the names. The only piece missing is for you to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And he massages it. The lawyer massages his words in such a way that I've heard so many times of just like, look, it's in the past. It's pain. Why bring it up again? Like, why do this? It's, I don't want to say it's a good argument, but it's an argument to just keep living a life of quote unquote peace and comfort, as opposed to digging things up and really getting into the painful business of bringing the truth to light. And then you have that amazing scene where I thought it was over. I thought we wouldn't see that character again. Michael Keaton goes out to his car and the lawyer comes out. I thought he was about to punch Michael Keaton or something. Like, honestly. And instead he just says, give me the paper. And like you said, he draws a large circle around all the names. Very
powerful, should be said. And because I tried to look and find like what actually happened and what didn't happen. And you look at scenes like that specifically where the action is so specific and like the screenwriter part of your brain is like, ooh, that's a good way to show what's going on. I'm not sure if there really was as dramatic as a confrontation as that where one person like just very very, very naturally but dramatically circles an entire list of names. Like, I don't know if that actually happened, but it doesn't matter. The point is that that was the source, the last source that they needed to fully be able to say, okay, we have enough information, we have enough people to back up the story that we're going to publish. Now we can publish it. So that speaks to the news gathering aspect of the film. And to make the conversation a little bit lighter for a moment, let's talk about the filmmaking. And as I said in the intro, Mark Ruffalo trying desperately to access public records, being told by a government official, by a city official, that like, no, sorry, you got to get a judge's approval first, come back down with the approval. Oh, we're closed for today. Come back in the morning, comes back in the morning. Can I borrow your copy? Or no, you can't. Trying to bribe him with money just so that he can use the copier. Like, that stuff is fun. And it speaks to the nuts and bolts of what it takes to actually gather information. This is, I don't want to say it's pre-internet, but, the internet is not, people aren't on social media presenting themselves as potential sources anymore. Information travels a lot slower. So there's a lot more boots on the ground, like actually getting to the heart and source of the story. Obviously, that still happens today, but it has a special relevance during this time. And it's quite exciting to watch. Do you have any favorite moments like that in the news game?
There were a lot of old school journalism techniques in this movie. Again, made me think a lot about All the President's Men. And honestly, there are two kind of emotional hooks into this movie that I grabbed onto. One, of course, is the tragedy and the journey to uncover truth and all of that. And also the other side of it is movies about journalism, which I don't think we have a lot of these days. And just on a personal note, it seems like journalism has become kind of a dirty word, just because it seems like, to me, and some of the people I interact with, interacting with journalism or reading news stories is an act of taking sides, which makes me very, very sad. And this movie, I think, is a great illustration of how if we're all just living for comfort and safety and just trying to make it towards tomorrow, that is something we all have to strive towards. But when you live for only those things, slowly, darkness and lies can creep in, institutions can be, I'm absolutely serious. I know this is a strange thing to say, but I think movies about journalism are extremely important because it's important for people to see how stories are researched, how people wait until, in the cases of good journalism, people wait until they have all the facts, until they can present a full argument to the public. And this is, the most prime example of a journalism movie where the main theme is, we're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. We're going to do possibly some damage along the way, but it's in service of probably the greatest truth, the greatest good there is, which is, we all want to know the facts, not so that we can feel comfortable, but that we can live the lives that we want with freedom and security and safety in our family and faith. And this movie kind of inspired me, but also seeing it right on the verge of like the AOL online era and, sort of serving as a threshold into the modern news landscape we live in today was a little depressing. But yeah, gosh, I'm not going to be able to get this movie out of my head for a while.
Well, a lot of we should shout out Participant Media, which is the production company behind this film, which sadly no longer exists. But in their 20 years or so of existence, their aim was to make socially conscious films and make them on a scale that would get people interested, involved, outraged, all the stuff that I keep bringing it back to documentary, but like that is the idea of, a lot of documentary features is, we're trying to raise awareness to issues and, make and have an actual social action come from this. And obviously this film is recounting a turning point that then brought great social change. Although how much, still remains to be seen because the Catholic Church is continuing to deal with this issue to the present day. And they probably will continue to deal with it for the rest of their existence. So, but we don't have to get too deep into that.
Can I tell you one thing that didn't bump on, but once you put Stanley Tucci in anything, it just the dynamic, the tone of your movie changes a great deal. Because Stanley Tucci he's just like every other character in this movie. He's delivering very dry, dialogue. There's not a lot of style injected into any of the characters or any of the acting or any of the shot compositions. However, there's just something about his presence and just how like over it he is and how just like put upon he is. I don't know.
Out of all the characters, his is the one with the most, I guess, color to the performance. Everyone else is sort of muted, working man. Liev Schreiber kind of is like the other end of the spectrum where he's so monotone that it comes off as like a charismatic performance. But yes, it's true. Like Tucci comes in and he's got the eyebrows and the frizzy hair and he doesn't want to talk to anyone. It's like, oh, okay, he's a character actor. We love him. Now, to your point about, the locked off camera and the subtle style, I agree with you. And one thing I wrote down, I'm looking at my notes here, is shoe leather scenes. Do you know what a shoe leather scene is?
What's a shoe leather scene?
Shoe leather scene is a term that I've heard used in writer rooms that describes a scene that basically no one really wants to write because its only purpose is to sort of get the characters from point A to point B, is to get a little bit of crucial exposition out, and there isn't really like a organic way to make it bigger and more interesting than it actually is. This movie is not entirely, but like almost entirely composed of shoe leather scenes, because that's what we're talking about. The reveal of information, taking that information and moving to the next scene. There's a lot of scenes of reflecting on the information that's been gathered to bring the audience up to speed with, where the reporters are, and to make sure that the audience understands how the stakes have changed, however subtle that is. And so for me, it was like this movie, what's especially impressive about it is it's all shoe leather scenes, and yet it is so compelling. You want to know how we get from point A to point B, and you want to know every step of the way. Just something that I felt watching the movie.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's always something I admire in writing, is when you can make small moments of fact-finding feel like profound dramatic turns, like
100%. Yeah, exactly.
The fact that they had all the names that they were looking for in the Catholic priest directories in the basement of the Boston Globe,
it's
and
so
all they
great.
needed
so great.
Like all we need to look for is like, what was the term, sick leave or like unassigned?
Yep.
And then they find all of them. At one point in our careers, we wrote something that kind of had a legal feel to it, something much different than this, a comedy, obviously. But I remember there was like, we have like a court case scene, and I remember just putting all that stuff together like a puzzle. And it was not fun until like you finally like figure out how you can make all this legal stuff fit together, because you're not just figuring out the mystery half of it, you're figuring out how it's going to be discovered and how you have to do it piece by piece. And then you have to zoom out and figure out like, does this work dramatically? Like, is this even interesting? And you have to constantly toggle between like facts and like, how are people going to discover these facts? And okay, how does this fit into a greater narrative? And, we haven't had a reveal in about 5 minutes. We should shift the timing around so that they find the directories right around this point. As much as real as this movie is, it did feel very well paced with how, the reveals kept coming up. And
the dramatic structure is airtight, and it feels it's Oliver Stone level, and that's what Stone always says. I'm a dramatist, it's like I tackle big, interesting, complicated ideas, but I have to make them interesting for an audience. Here's another great moment that I think you would appreciate. 9/11, September 11th, the attacks, that is like the midpoint of the movie. And I'm sorry, the midpoint, it's a little bit after the midpoint of the movie. It feels like they are about to really hone in on what the story they're going to publish is. Then 9/11 happens, and all news gathering on any other story stops. And what an interesting thing to use, and I have no doubt that this really did affect the timing of the publishing of the article. Like, can you name something else that happened, between September 11th, 2001 and December 31st, 2001? You absolutely cannot. The only thing that happened this is going to be such an American-centric thing to say, and I mean it hyperbolically, but my point, I think, is accurate. The whole world was only thinking about what happened on 9/11, as were our news organizations, as were these reporters, as they were reassigned to go work, the 9/11 story. And we see, so that's a great, dramatic structure moment. We see the emotional content of that. The victims that they've all been interviewing are now furious. When is our story going to get told? You mean to tell me because this other thing happened, you're going to stop, reporting? You're going to stop your writing? And, this thing that I am personally laying my heart out for you, that I'm re-traumatizing myself, even reflecting on it, you're telling me that it's just not going to happen, that it's going to get buried again? It really is a very powerful moment in the movie.
Yeah, so you're going to have to remind me who this character was. I think he's another lawyer. I think everyone in this movie is just a lawyer. I'm just going to go with that. But I think there's another character who's a lawyer who meets with Michael Keaton, not the one from the end, but it happens right after 9/11. Do you know the scene I'm talking about? And he starts saying these perfectly reasonable phrases about 9/11 and how we need to come together as a country. But then he leads the conversation into, so why don't you just drop this, Michael Keaton? Like, we're already suffering as a country.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow,
Yeah.
that's like the type of, like, I don't want to call him a villain or an antagonist, because even those like labels seem a little tacky to apply to this guy. But that is the best writing of an antagonistic force coming at your main character, because like you can I don't want to say you can agree with him, but like he is tapping into something that is so natural and is such a gut human instinct that it's like, how could you disagree with him? Well, you can disagree with him because you're in the point of view of Michael Keaton and you have been hounding the story for this long and you've seen what it's done to victims. So to put like the presence of, I don't want to say evil, but the presence of status quo and just ignore it and do everything for comfort and safety and security and don't worry about it. To put that voice into that character, it's like, wow, that is amazing writing. It's an awful character and it's a scene that makes me sick, but it is great writing.
Well, I think you're saying something very profound, is that to call that person evil is not accurate. He's human.
Right.
He is the product of his world. He believes he's doing the right thing. That's the really frustrating part out of it. Like, the villains are the pedophile priest that did this, and the diocese officials that helped cover it all up. They are the villains of this piece, and we don't spend a lot of time with them. Instead, we're stuck with the middlemen who rationalize, who feel like they are powerless to do anything about the situation, and so they're only doing the best that they can. And the argument that the country needs to heal, we just got hit really hard. Do you really think that we can withstand this story now? And that is a great question, a great dramatic question that thankfully they had the right answer to.
You put that so well, that all of these lawyer characters are just middlemen trying to just get by, stay comfortable, earn a paycheck, do what they've been doing. And to a certain extent, the Spotlight team they're kind of middlemen as well, because one of the first lines of defense in covering the story is, well, didn't the daily reporting cover that? Didn't that get covered already? Like, that's one of the ongoing excuses at the Boston Globe. Not excuses, but one of the deflection points is to say, look, someone sent all this stuff in already. We've already addressed it through our daily reporters. We're not going to do a big expose because it's been done. We've done it. People know about it. And you're right. It's just like it's such a mild but omnipresent version of fear that like all these characters just don't want to do anything, because the alternative is digging up a lot of painful stuff and causing some collateral damage in the process. Yeah, middlemen. Wow, that's a great way to put it. All the middlemen.
Something that struck me that again, as I said in the beginning, I saw this movie when it came out, and I don't think I liked it or disliked it. I think I just sort of I didn't engage with it perhaps the way that I am now. This time, I was really struck by, the politics of journalism and the rivalries amongst papers is such an interesting subplot in this movie. They are so concerned that they're going to get scooped by another paper. And like, I give the filmmakers a lot of credit, and also the real life reporters being okay with being portrayed this way. Isn't it crazy to say that we have a story that's about child abuse, but a major concern of ours is that someone else is going to get to break the story before we do? And that is, but that's an honest reaction to a group of people who have dedicated the Spotlight team, who they put their personal lives on hold to dig deep into something that is so painful for even them to confront. Obviously not as much as the victims and the families who went through this, but for them as well, making them question what they believe.
The rivalry between newspapers, look, I'm sure that was a real thing, and I'm sure that you're right, that is a concern. We have to make it to deadline first before they do. But some part of me was like thinking of Shakespeare in Love, where all the theaters are like competing over these plays, and it's like, really? There was a time where like all these theaters like needed the new hot play, and
that's a very funny connection. But come on, that continues to this day. Every source wants to be the one to break the story. Like that's just the business of having a news outlet. You're only as good as the stories that you break and that you can say you broke first, and that everyone can say when they also report on it that so and so did this first. I mean, it's sort of an interesting symbiotic but also competitive relationship. So anyway, let's wrap this up. I think we both really like this movie, both encourage everyone to see it. On the lightest note that I can think of, what'd you think of the music by Mr. Howard Shore?
I completely forgot about the music in this movie. I didn't pay any attention to it. Was there something special about the music?
No, this is the second time that Howard Shore has scored a movie set in Boston. He did The Departed as well. Your favorite movie.
Oh my gosh, I didn't make that connection. Oh my gosh, you're right. Why wasn't Dropkick Murphys in this?
Spotlight.
Is this the tip line?
You think he's got something?
I want to keep digging.
We need to focus on the institution. Show me that it came from the top down.
No need to fear, they're here. Just call for Fantastic Four. Don't need no more.
So, I want to get to our discussion on Fantastic Four as soon as possible. But first, as you know, James, this podcast recording goes up in a live feed to our Major Motion Problems executives. And they did send me an email with a few thoughts. So, and hey, they absolutely love what we're doing, our charming back and forth. And look, they don't want to change a thing. But that being said, they do have a few tweaks. First off, just blue sky spitballing. Do we have to talk about movies? Is there something that's a little more fun, like pickleball or crypto? Let's see. Oh, they want to redo most of your stuff with you and a bad blonde wig.
No,
don't worry.
We are in audio. That makes no sense. We are in audio first format. That's impossible.
Do you want to give a note on a note? They think you would look better in a blonde wig, and it's going to cut together fine. Don't worry.
I'm learning so much about how this podcast is produced. I thought it was just two guys struggling to do it on their own, but who knew? Who knew? All right, keep going. That's fine.
Oh, shoot. One more little thing here. They want to completely change the tone and content of everything we've done so far. Again, they love... No. Again,
we're in agreement there. I think I can actually help them with that.
Look, again, want to reiterate, they love what we're doing and they don't want to change a thing. But if we don't make those changes, they're going to gut it all out and Frankenstein it back together. Sound good? So those are the top line notes, and I'll send you the PDF with the remaining 17 pages worth of tweaks. Mm-hmm. Now, it's clobbering time. Let's talk about Fantastic Four.
What if we got these powers for a reason?
Nope, the other Fantastic Four.
From the pages of the world's greatest comic book adventure.
Other Fantastic Four.
I herald his beginning.
Nope, other one, last one.
This guy doesn't take orders well.
Yeah, especially from people who say, I don't take orders well.
There you go, fourth time's the charm.
I think it was a good bit, but you did miss a Fantastic Four.
What, Rise of the Silver Surfer?
Yeah, Rise of the Silver Surfer, come on. Oh boy, I can tell you really did your research.
Well, while we're on the topic, it may be helpful to understand why there are so many Fantastic Four movies, and why there always seems to be one either in theaters or in development at any given time. Well, in 2009, 20th Century Fox held control of the movie franchise rights as long as they continued making Fantastic Four movies, whether their slate of films called for it or not. This was the same story back in December of 1992, when German producer Bernd Eichinger needed to rush a low-budget Fantastic Four movie into production, turning to legendary B-movie producer Roger Corman for help.
But it is true, I was there with the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man before this type of film was dominating the box office the way it was.
The resulting 1994 film was never released, and if you ever happen to find one of the many publicly available versions online, I have to say, it's kind of fun to watch. Like a motion comic with live-action people who are saying exactly what's in their speech bubbles.
Stop them! It's clobbering time for real.
From the mid to late 90s, the Fantastic Four went back into development with many big names attached at some point in the process. From Home Alone director Chris Columbus to Batman '89 screenwriter Sam Hamm. After developing the project yet again with future Ant-Man director Peyton Reed, 20th Century Fox settled on music video turned feature director Tim Story.
So I did music videos for about 3 years, did about 40. And then I remember there was a moment where I kind of saw the writing on the wall that, music videos weren't going to be what they were. Because what was great about me is I did come up when kind of video directors were like, a big deal. There was a big deal. And we were also, our name started to be, on
Mike
the
Williams.
exactly.
Yeah.
And but we also had a respect that you kind of could do ideas and the artists and managers would let you just do the thing. And at some point you started to see that kind of change.
Story ended up contributing not just one, but 2 entries to the Fantastic Four film franchise. And most importantly, they were both released to the public and made their money back. However, as time marched on, the contractual need to produce another Fantastic Four movie reared its ugly head yet again. I could go into the round of development that followed Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, but instead I'd like to point out that I haven't even said the name Josh Trank yet. The person who actually directed and co-wrote Fantastic Four 2015, also referred to as Fant Four Stick, due to the weirdly stylized title design that was featured in the film's marketing. If you or someone you know worked their way up in the entertainment industry, the early career of Josh Trank may sound like a story you've heard before. Ambition, success, and discovering something new and original, with pride and mistakes sometimes sneaking up from behind. While 20th Century Fox was developing a new Fantastic reboot with the usual heavy hitters like screenwriter Akiva Goldsman, Trank was making a name for himself as a short film director and an editor on the Patton Oswalt dark comedy Big Fan. I don't know if dark comedy...
Good movie. Very good
I don't
movie.
know if dark comedy is the right term, but if you haven't seen Big Fan, you should. It's great. It wasn't until the release of Trank's 2012 found footage superhero film, Chronicle, that Fox considered him to helm the new Fantastic Four of the gritty, gray financial collapse era. While it may be argued that Chronicle had its own production baggage, at the time, it was widely seen as something inventive, clever, and very, very profitable. In February of 2012, Charles Gant of The Guardian praised the film and the success of its bold young director. With Chronicle also nabbing first place in the US, the film's 26-year-old director Josh Trank has been hailed as the youngest ever to helm a chart-topping movie. Following the likes of Cloverfield, District 9, and Paranormal Activity, Chronicle is another reminder that a clever concept, well executed and marketed, can more than compensate for a lack of marquee name talent. As the distributor of Chronicle, Fox clearly saw the potential of a young filmmaker capable of telling a fresh, new coming-of-age superhero story.
I love the Fantastic Four. I loved the Fantastic Four when I was a kid. Because to me, they were like the most realistic characters that I could identify with. They were always fighting with each other, and it wasn't really so much about characters fighting supervillains as much as they were just fighting each other's their personalities were fighting against each other, trying to figure out how to do something the right way and together as a team.
Now, James, I'm afraid it's time to put you in the hot seat. True or false? Fantastic Four 2015, directed and co-written by Josh Trank, featured a tie-in with Arby's. True or false?
Oh, God. How many lifelines do I have? Did I use them all in Slumdog Millionaire?
You did. It's only true or false. And your only friend, the only friend you can call is me. So
is you, and you're not going to tell me.
No, I'm not going to tell you.
What have our lives become?
True.
Oh, God. I have to assume, wait, this might be one trick thing where it's false, but that's because there's another fast food.
Oh, you're so good.
All right, let's play dumb. True.
False. Fantastic Four 2015 featured a Slamtastic Four tie-in with Denny's. I gotcha.
That's why you wanted to go to Denny's all the time. Oh my God, it's making sense. I was like, James, get up. We have to go get the Slamtastic Four.
There you go. With dishes such as the Human Torch skillet, the Fantastic Four's cheese omelet, and, of course,
The Thing Burger. Welcome to Denny's. Fantastic Four, only in theater.
So, James, I sent you something from eBay a few weeks ago. You can go ahead and open that. That's right. I've sent you an original Denny's The Thing Burger from 2015. So you can go ahead and enjoy that while I go into the production history and story of...
Why is it still soft? Like, it's not stale at all. Like, what is in this thing?
I didn't send you any burger. I sent you an original Denny's Thing Burger. So you can go ahead and enjoy that while I go into the production history and story of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. And if you have to throw up, just be sure to let me know if it's me or if it's the Thing Burger.
Dr. Storm, we gave you 6 years and millions of dollars, and you gave us nothing. What's different now?
Reed Richards. He knows answers to questions we don't even know to ask yet.
So, 20th Century Fox, you've had decades of development and millions of dollars to make a critical and financial success out of the Fantastic Four. What's different now? The answer in 2012, of course, was Josh Trank and his realistic science-based approach to the reboot, which included, among other things, a fair amount of body horror as the Fantastic Four gained their powers. If you were to go solely off of Fox's official marketing for the movie, you'd think that Josh Trank was out to make another gritty coming-of-age story like Chronicle, which in turn would give Fox the Christopher Nolan caliber superhero franchise they had been hoping for. Behind the scenes, however, Trank had something much different planned out in his head. In a 2020 interview with Polygon, Trank revealed that the end of the Fantastic Four was going to very organically set up the adventure and weirdness and the fun. That would be the wish fulfillment of the sequel, because obviously the sequel would be, okay, now we are superpowered forever and it's weird and funny and there's adventure lurking around every corner. But the first movie was going to basically be the filmic version of how I saw myself all the time. The metaphor of these characters crawling out of hell. You know, for kids. Brought to you by the Slamtastic Four menu, only at Denny's. Seriously though, how do you square a young original filmmaker with a studio that, in part, is motivated by contractual rights agreements, action figures, and license revenue from Thing Burgers? While Fox's studio interference played a major factor in the film's development and production, apparently Trank also had major issues finding the right tone and story with his co-writers Jeremy Slater and Simon Kinberg. In the same Josh Trank interview that I mentioned, Polygon writer Matt Patches reveals what Jeremy Slater went through on the project. Slater estimated that he wrote nearly 18 drafts and 2,000 pages of material during his time on Fantastic Four. Only 2 of those drafts made it to the studio. In an effort to retain control, Trank acted as the messenger between Fox and Slater, leaving certain studio notes out of their conversations and only delivering certain drafts to the studio for feedback. Right from the start of the process, Josh told me I wasn't allowed to speak with Fox without him present, Slater said. I never saw 95% of those notes. Now, since most of this information is based on interviews and rumors, who knows how much of it is true or who is to blame for the misaligned vision of Fant4stick? A quick news search about the making of the movie will turn up all sorts of gossipy stories, with each one alternating between putting the blame on Trank and 20th Century Fox. It's difficult to read how the studio immediately iced out Trank while never really having a vision for the movie. Just as the film was being released in August of 2015, the feud culminated in a tweet from Trank. A year ago, I had a fantastic version of this, and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though.
It is our duty as human beings
to push forward into the unknown. But sometimes you're looking to discover one thing, and you find something else.
The end result that arrived in theaters is a harmless and confused attempt to retell the classic origin story of the Fantastic Four. Miles Teller stars as the young and brilliant scientist Reed Richards, alongside his loyal best friend Ben Grimm, played by Jamie Bell. Despite coming from difficult, broken homes, both Reed and Ben have spent their childhood developing a new form of teleportation technology. After a couple flash forwards and a very strange childhood trauma scene that gives us a new take on "it's clobbering time," the two best friends come upon the existence of a new parallel dimension, and so is fellow young scientist Sue Storm, played by Kate Mara.
We've had it analyzed repeatedly, but no one's ever seen anything like it.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, we're from the Baxter Foundation. This is my daughter, Sue.
Hi.
Hey.
We'd like to give you a full scholarship.
Where did you say you're from again?
Under the supervision of Professor Franklin Storm, Reed, Ben, and Sue are given control of a research experiment to venture into the parallel dimension known as Planet Zero. To build the new teleportation device, Professor Storm recruits his genius engineer son, Johnny, played by Michael B. Jordan, as well as computer technician Victor Von Doom, played by Toby Cabell, who apparently went as Victor Domashev in Josh Trank's earlier versions of the story. Professor Storm makes it clear to the five of them that their breakthrough could potentially change the world for the better, although Victor seems to have developed his own views on the world since leaving the other young scientists at Storm's Baxter Foundation.
Think about it. People running the Earth are the same ones running it into the ground, so maybe it deserves what it's got coming to it.
Dr. Doom over here.
Victor may or may not also have a thing for Sue, who happens to be hitting it off with Reed as they finally finish their teleportation device. Now, I'm afraid I have bad news and even worse bad news. The bad news is that the whole experiment has been taken over by government bad guy Dr. Harvey Allen, played by Tim Blake Nelson. The even worse bad news is that this movie manages to make even great actors come off as bland as boring.
Gentlemen, everyone, you all deserve an enormous pat on the back. I think it's time to start coordinating with our friends at NASA.
What?
It works. We have to start thinking about sending men.
Yeah, us.
Disappointed, drunk, and determined, Reed rallies the other four scientists to embark on an unofficial trip to the parallel dimension before Dr. Allen can seize their project. Arriving on the harsh, primitive terrain of Planet Zero, the teammates find themselves in a world of heavy ADR work and not great-looking CGI backgrounds. No, wait, Victor, don't touch the magic green goo. You were written as such a smart character just 20 minutes ago. Please, Victor, do not touch the magic green goo. Well, shoot, I guess they all have superpowers now. Reed can stretch, Sue can turn invisible and also do stuff with force fields, Ben is stuck as a giant rock monster, and Victor is stuck back on Planet Zero, left to stew in a pool of green goo and anger. At this point in the story is where some of Trank's body horror elements come in. And while I guess it's something new and unlike anything I've ever seen, I'm not sure if I want to see Mr. Fantastic, the Thing, the Human Torch, and the Invisible Woman be experimented on by the US government. It just doesn't go well with my Fantastic Four cheese omelet. Following yet another flash forward in the story, we learn that Reed is now on the run, and Ben is now on a military mission to track down his former best friend. Dr. Allen, still bent on using the talents of the four scientists to reach Planet Zero, totes the promise of a cure to get the team back on board. The machine opens the gate to the parallel dimension yet again, but this time, a reshoot stand-in for Victor Von Doom is waiting for them. Making matters worse, yeah. Apparently that actor was like not in the end of the movie. He's like, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. Making matters worse, Doom has somehow stolen the giant skybeam from the Avengers and every other superhero movie, and it's like gonna destroy Earth or something like that.
We can't beat him. He's stronger than any of us.
Yeah, he is. But he's not stronger than all of us. Look, this place gave him his powers, but it gave us all of ours, too. It's who we are now. Maybe it's who we're meant to be.
Well, I hate to ruin the ending, but guess what? They learned to work together and save the day. The financial and critical disappointment of the 2015 Fantastic Four reboot apparently had an immediate impact on Trank's career, with many outlets reporting on how his reputation led to the cancellation of his own Star Wars standalone spin-off. It's such a simple, obvious takeaway, but when a director and a studio aren't a good match, it's astounding how quickly a movie can become an awful, aimless mess, especially in this age of amazing film technology where anything can be changed right up until the release. And sometimes, like in the case of Cats from 2019, even after its opening in theaters. Instead of blaming studios and directors, shouldn't we be blaming the very system that perpetuates an endless, got another email from the executives, and oh wow, they really hate how I'm trying to wrap this all up. So James, how about I go ahead and I'm going to write a little tweet to the executives, and why don't you tell me what you thought of Fant Force Stick?
Wait, are we Josh Trank in this little scenario that you've created?
I don't know.
Or are we Jeremy Slater? Are we Simon Kinberg? Are we Toby Kebbell, realizing that he didn't even get invited back to the reshoots? Who are we in this scenario?
Look, I just want to say that you do look pretty good in your blonde wig, and this is going to cut together great. And I haven't been shaving for a while, and so I think they can just cut me in, right? They can just cut me in with stubble, and no one will be able to tell the reshoot scenes from the regular scenes. What did you think of this movie?
Here's my opening thought. I forgot how much I did not expect this movie to be as much of a nostalgia kick for me as it was, but not because of anything to do with the movie. But I was just reminded of so many things. 2015, Josh Trank, Chronicle. That was a big movie for us. We, like everyone else, loved it and thought, oh, how cool. What a smart, way to execute that story. That's so great. And yeah, he seems like he'd be great to do Fantastic Four. That's awesome. The other thing that I was hit with is I forgot that, and I'm sorry I don't remember the actor's name, but he plays Freddy on House of Cards, the owner of the barbecue joint in the early seasons of House of Cards. He plays Dr. Storm in this movie, and I forgot.
You're right.
I was like, I loved him on House of Cards, and then here he was, and I'm remembering now how excited I was that he was in this movie too, because he's just such a great actor, and he is good in this movie. I think actually all the performances in this movie are fine. Like there's nothing like wrong with any of them. I think you and your very, very, as always, very funny introduction to this film. No one does it better than you. You really captured the confusion that must have been going on, where one person was trying to exert a vision. He was trying to put out fires before they actually became fires, but ended up creating fires himself. He couldn't let created this sort of cone of silence around him so no one could kind of guide him to help him get the vision that he wanted. And what he ended up with was something that had a couple of moments that might be close to that vision, but ultimately got sanded down to being sanded down to just being coherent. That's how you can tell that this movie went off the rails. It's like, we just need to settle for a basic story that goes A, B, C, doesn't have any real character development, but at least isn't completely confusing either. I don't think the initial ideas for it, that's the quote that you had about emerging from hell is interesting. That's not where I would have started for this movie. And I don't think it has to be a big, Technicolor family adventure either. You can do a darker take on this material, but you've got to, this wasn't the way to get into it, I don't think.
Gosh, you've given me, as always, so many smart things to respond to, and maybe I should start from the broadest point possible, which is, for the last 2 weeks, I have been watching Fantastic Four movies and also the movies of Josh Trank. I tried to watch Capone. I got a half hour in and I couldn't take it anymore. It was both boring and it was so uninteresting. I couldn't stand it. But I feel like I've been taking crazy pills because I went from someone who didn't care about the Fantastic Four, really knew nothing about it. And now I'm this is the most versatile premise. You could do anything with the Fantastic Four. You could tell a fun coming of age story that I'll go into it maybe a little bit later, but it has a structure that could be so familiar and could be in line with an old George S. Kaufman and Moss Hart play called Merrily We Roll Along, which was adapted into a musical by Stephen Sondheim and George Firth, which is a very simple, relatable story about young people with great ambitions, but slowly the real world takes them down and they sell out little by little until they finally have to come to a reckoning when they're adults over what have I done with my life? That's one way to take the property. You could lean into the original, like the stuff that makes The Incredibles so good, the family dynamic, the Tim Story, the early 2000s ones. Look, that again, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but I love that 2005 Fantastic Four movie. It's like the story of like a broken family coming together, a family not by blood, like slowly learning to tolerate each other. There's so many ways that you could take the Fantastic Four franchise. And it seemed like Josh Trank was like, oh, how about body horror? Which I suppose is a direction, but really,
well,
do you really want to watch?
To the body horror point, yes, I know that that's just one sequence of the film. Like you have to spend an hour to get to that sequence. And so this is where I think the movie goes wrong right away and becomes just a whole lot of just sort of like, that's fine, but isn't particularly fresh or new. I think what he was aiming for, and maybe what the studio was hoping for too, was the sort of Spielberg-y kid geniuses are coming together to like do something great. And that is a good take. I mean, I can't stand whenever some kid genius has a device in his room and it knocks out the power to an entire neighborhood. I can't stand that.
You know what I would like to see is like the next day with like the power company showing up and being like, not only is this a $10,000 fine, but we're bringing in child protection services because your kid is he's on a different level, and you as parents are so irresponsible. I want to see the morning after scene where the city comes down hard on this.
Well, let's
boy
be
genius.
honest. That boy genius knocked out life-saving systems at the local hospital with his little science project. 3 people are in. They didn't wake up.
You're right.
So, all right. Anyway, I'm being a jerk. I can be smart.
No, this is good.
Okay.
This is all really gold.
But just
stuff.
remember though, like even that is not that interesting. And to the it's clobbering time.
Jesus Christ.
But I think I read in the credits. Do you know who plays that older brother who says it's clobbering time? And I can't believe this isn't talked about more.
Oh no.
It's Chet Hanks.
That makes it.
This movie is perfect. Is my takeaway. I love this movie so much.
Oh my gosh, if I worked on this movie, like I would still be like taking like aspirin to like get the headache out of my system. Jeez, everything is just like it's so.
Let's talk about how it makes you feel, because everything we're talking about, it's all you said this word and it's perfect. This movie is harmless. It has like no teeth. The body horror stuff just seems like wrong, but not in a way that you're like it like sinks the movie. It doesn't like improve it or sink it any, lower. It just is sort of there along with all the boring stuff beforehand. I will say I know the Fantastic Four mythos very well, and probably not as much as hopefully our special guest will in an upcoming segment. But what one like new thing that they added to this movie that I don't remember in any other retellings of the Fantastic Four coming together, it's that character Dr. Storm, played by Freddy from House of Cards. Like, I don't remember the Fantastic Four ever having an adult mentor, like actually making them young people who are geniuses who are forced to work together, and there is a guy overseeing everything who is both their protector, their challenger, their antagonist, and their father figure. And this is a line in the trailer because it's a good line when he says, like, what have you done with my children? That for a moment, I was like, I see a movie somewhere in there. It's not like, it's wrong because, like, Dr. Storm is not the main character of this movie, but it is something new to the Fantastic Four story that could have been way more interesting than actually executed here.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I think why this movie frustrates and scares me a lot is because it reminds me so much of Howard the Duck, where like Neo seeing the code at the end of the Matrix, like I can see all the pieces there. Like I can see in Howard the Duck, I can see like a fish out of water story and a character who like learns to embrace this new life that he never thought he could have. In this movie, in Fan Four Stick, I can see all the building blocks are there so clearly, and Professor Storm is like the Obi-Wan character, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And so,
exactly.
So structurally, if you were just throwing the most cliche standard plot on the wall of this iteration of Fantastic Four, you would say, okay, Professor Storm, an integral character. You need to set him up in the beginning, which they do, of him imparting on these kids, like, you have a chance to do something great. I know you guys are all brilliant, but it's more than just brilliance. Like, you have to take it upon yourselves to realize that you have the ability to change the world for the good. You don't kill that character off. Like in the last half hour, you don't have him just like get killed by the villain during like an action set piece. You have him die like maybe halfway through, right? And then you have some time where the characters are aimless, shiftless, maybe leaning into the wrong things, and that's when you have Reed Richards say like, guys, remember Professor Storm? Like, remember like why we started building this thing? It was to help the world. That's what you do with that character. I'm sure that note came up. Maybe that was, said during one of the Fox studio note sessions with Trank, but they already shot the footage and all they could do is, vaporize Professor Storm with CGI. Who knows? Like grading this end result that ended up in theaters, it's like, it's less of a movie and more of a question, more of like because you can see the seams so clearly that it's like, well, I guess this could have been a body horror movie if you expanded all of that and just made it more about, these kids and like what's happening to me as I'm growing and all these unexpected, but to reduce it to like a 5-minute scene, that doesn't work. You could make it about a group of young people trying to change the world and one of them goes astray. Can I talk about, I know I've been talking for a while. Let me make this one point about Victor Von Doom, Victor Domashev, whatever. And then
say his name, Chris. It's Victor Domashev.
You know what? That is the exact decision that I would have made if I were in that writing room for Fan Four Stick. I would be like flipping through old Marvel comics and being like, can we give him like a better name than Victor Von Doom? Because if we have to ADR this with Tim Blake, if we have to ADR this later and like zoom in on the word Victor Von Doom on a sheet of paper, it's really going to be weird and jarring that in this gray financial collapse movie of, 2015, we're calling characters Victor Von Doom. One more point about...
So wait, but to be clear though, you would prefer Robert Downey Jr.'s triumphant return to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You would prefer it to be under the character Victor Domashev?
Domashev.
I'm sorry.
Look, I think you'll agree with me that he needed some beat. So he's not even A to B. He's A to A.
I know. He's exactly the same throughout.
Like his character, His character makes sense, and apparently Josh Trank wrote him as a Latvian spy in an early draft. So maybe
cool.
I'm just projecting and I'm making things up, but maybe his angle was like, I'm going to take this technology to Latveria where like the people are poor and they actually need it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For his people. Yes. Yeah. No, of course. There's always one more like noble motivation, a selfish one, but could be empathetically noble, which is helpful in these things.
The only halfway clever part about his character is that he tricks, right? He tricks the government people. Tim Blake Nelson, that's his name, right? Tim Blake Nelson.
Yes.
He tricks the government people into, letting their guard down so we can start, just blowing crap up in our dimension for no real reason other than what? It's just like one line, like, your world must die so that mine can live. It's like, all right, sure, fine, whatever.
When you meet Toby Kebbell, like his character introduction, like he's like in a dark room. Is he wearing some sort of like bizarre eyepiece too?
Yes.
Like it's funny in 2015, like we weren't like ready to say like it's okay to be a gamer and to like be obsessed with like streaming video games, and like being a gamer is like a totally normal like cool thing. And to be clear, it is. That's like everyone has their hobbies and their passions or whatever, and video games are for many people. But it's very clear to me that like the take on that is like Josh Trank was like, all right, you're a nerd, okay? You're a nerd and you play video games all the time, and you're a very handsome man, Toby, but we are gonna make you so repulsive to look at.
Right. Yeah, it was, again, it did not work. They needed, again, maybe there was more in a previous draft. Apparently, Josh Trank had a lot of things planned for this movie that did not make it into the final cut. Again, we're grading and critiquing something that is fundamentally broken. However, I'll say it again, it's so frustrating because you can see all the pieces are clearly there. Can I shift gears into Chris's hyperfixation corner for a moment?
My favorite corner. Go ahead.
So, my dad imparted many life lessons onto me, and one of them was whenever you're watching a movie that takes place in a giant factory or, a villain's lair where they're building a machine, and you see people with welding torches and welding guns and there's sparks flying all over the place, that is a sign of bad, inefficient welding done by bad welders.
Well, Kris, could you explain to our listeners who might not be aware, your dad, what was his career his entire life?
My dad was, he was in the field of automotive welding, and he knew a lot about this. He also knew a lot about the 1997 movie The Postman, but that's a different topic.
Yes, as we've covered. Well, thank you. Yes.
He would...
Yeah, I know. You would have lost him. Like, if you had seen this in theaters with him, he'd be like, come on, Kris, we're going.
No. He would have... If this came on during a Sunday afternoon, he would stand 6 feet away from the TV, standing up with his arms crossed, and he wouldn't leave, but he'd be like, Kris, you see that? See those welding sparks? That's not what happened. How about I take you down to the plant? I'll show you how real welding's done.
What if he revealed that he had a Dr. Doom like metal suit that he would, that he's been working on? And the best part is no welding sparks when he put it together.
My dad
just nice clean lines.
But if I had seen this, last thing about my dad, if we had seen this together in the theater, I mean, you hate it whenever I say, oh no, or whenever I have a human reaction to something in the theater, you always say, Kris, shut up, you're ruining this. But if I saw this with my dad, we would have both done the Leo Once Upon a Time in Hollywood snap and point at the screen when the welding appeared, and people would have turned to us and be like, what are you snapping at? It's bad. It's an example of bad welding, and they would have been like, oh, okay, all right, fine.
We should do what do you call a podcast that's not your main cast? A side cast on welding in films, and we should strive to find the most accurate depiction of welding in film. Okay, what else do you want to say about Fan Force?
Honestly, like if I had to just only say nice things about Fan Force Stick 2015, I would say that the friendship story between Ben and Reed really got to me. At the beginning, I thought that was very sweet and charming, and it's a little difficult to give Ben skills and usefulness when he's not a brilliant scientist like Reed Richards. But I thought they did such a good job at the beginning establishing... I love that scene in the junkyard after it's clobbering time where Ben... It's great, where Ben finds Reed, just like going through some junk. And
very, very early Spielberg. It seems familiar, but it works. And I'm glad you brought this up because that is the one element you talked about, like seeing the seams, like all the pieces are kind of there. That if you like actually made some connections, you would have a better movie. If the movie would be so bold to make this just the Reed Richards movie, like make him the central character. There is something, because that relationship is set up so efficiently, so clearly, and so effectively, that when Ben does get transformed into this horrifying rock creature, like, that is Reed's fault. He is the one that called his friend to come to the lab so that they can go into this other dimension. There is something to be said that if this was Reed's movie and he started off as a kid who charismatically assembled this group of friends to service his vision, And, you know, he doesn't trick them, but he gives them all the promise of, you're going to be a part of something great. We're going to do this all together. And it's clearly and firmly his ego, perhaps stoked by maybe a more friendly in the beginning bad angel on his shoulder, Viktor Dorbyshev, Latverian spy or not. You know, stoking him like, Reed, we have to take this extra step. You know, come on, Richards, what, do you want to be remembered or not? And it's Reed Richards who brings all his friends into this thing. Everyone, and this is where the body horror part actually becomes thematic, is those problems are directly the result of something Reed did. And for the first time, he has to contend with not just putting the power out in, you know, his neighborhood, but he has hurt the people that actually care for him and that he cares about. And so then his life becomes, how do I cure them? How do I fix them? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I know a lot of this is in the comic books. Reed trying to, quote unquote, fix Ben is a big part of a lot of Fantastic Four stories. Only then for them in this movie, after this cure, you know, section of the body horror attempts at a cure, for them to realize we're actually, you know, whether or not a cure is possible, these are gifts that we can use to make the world a better place and use them to come together to overcome the now revealed evil Viktor Dorbyshev. Again, this is a very easy, clear plot that is so simple that it seems like, you know, oh, we don't want to do that, we want to innovate. But if body horror was the big takeaway, or just at least like, let's contend with what it looks like to stretch a man in that way, I do think like you should lean into that aspect for the emotional stuff and eventually come out on the other side. If Josh Trank if you want to go through hell, but actually come through it with a character who has learned a big lesson at the end to have big adventures from then on.
Right. You're exactly right. Gosh, we should find like the final draft file for this movie and just like rewrite the whole thing and send it back to Fox so that when the rights expire, or no, never mind, we're out of the whole rights thing because now that Fox owns Disney. So I guess they'll never have to go through that again. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That scene in the plane, I think like maybe 2/3 of the way through the movie where Ben has captured Reed, you know, somewhere in a jungle, and they're flying back to the government base. They kind of hit on it, but it's like, man, Ben was he was supposed to be Reed's protector. Like they should have made much more out of that scene and connecting it back to their childhood, because without like some sort of thematic through line of like, remember the things that we aspired to do when we were younger. Without that, it just feels kind of like, well, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And like they really...
This movie is this happens, this happens, this happens.
For real.
And it all logically makes sense, but it is just a series of events happening with no forward momentum.
Right. Sue Storm has almost nothing to do. It's...
Oh my goodness, it's crazy. It's like I remembered that she was like an afterthought from the first time I saw it, but it was really shocking this time. It's like, wow, they didn't give her anything. I guess with Michael B. Jordan, you know, as adopted siblings, they kind of have a little bit of a relationship, you know, older sister, younger brother sort of thing, but it's not like that goes anywhere.
Nope, nothing. Again, all the building blocks are there, and it's so frustrating that Fox and Trank just couldn't make it work, or they couldn't come together to like make something cohesive. It's a shame, but we did get the Thing burger and the Human Torch skillet, and we also got our new special.
Oh, sorry, I'm eating my Thing burger now, and
James,
you know, it's good. It's good.
Don't eat. That was a joke. I sent it to you as a joke.
It's good. Maybe I'll wash it down with a little. What was the drink tie-in? There must have been a drink. The Victor Von Doom ooze, the goo.
No, they served up dirty dishwasher with whoever was dumb enough to. Do you think they ever told Josh Trank? Do you think like Fox ever sat down with Trank and like, we love everything you're doing. It's great. We are going to have a tie-in with Denny's, so we do need like this. we do need this, because in the commercials they don't even show the actors' faces. They just show the Human Torch sitting down at like a booth, and like he says, "Flame on." Oh, I'll take that to go.
Well, that's the way I would do it. I mean, every Denny's meal I've ever had has been served at room temperature, so I doubt there's any flaming on going on in the kitchen. Also, if they want to talk about body horror and the Fantastic Four, they should go to the Denny's bathroom after someone has Fantastic Four pancakes or whatever. Got 'em. Okay, what's next?
No need to fear, they're here. Just call the four.
James, listeners, for the very first time on Major Motion Problems, we have a guest joining us. And not just any guest, but a very special guest and a dear lifelong friend of ours. Of course, I'm talking about the extremely talented and accomplished comic book artist, Isaac Goodhart. Isaac has a long and impressive history working as an artist with credits including DC Comics projects such as Batgirl, Under the Moon, A Catwoman Tale, and Victor and Nora, A Gotham Love Story. Most recently, Isaac worked as an artist on The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos with James Tynan and Tate Bromble. I own a copy, and you should pick one up too. It's a fantastic original comic and very much worth your time. Isaac is here to help shed some light on the history of the Fantastic Four comics, which hopefully will help us better understand the disaster that is Fant Four Stick. Isaac Goodhart, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We've had good times together. We've worked on things together. And, you know, I consider myself very lucky and blessed that all of my best friends, like you two guys, are also extremely talented and just fun to work with. And, another spoiler alert, Isaac and I were also roommates for a long time. And that was when Isaac was going through his spicy snack phase, I believe, and every evening there was like a pile of like different spicy chips on the living room table, and I just don't know how your digestive system handled it, to be honest.
I mean, I'm a wreck. Yeah, no, I'm still feeling the effects of it. This 15 years later, it's not good.
And don't forget what was in the refrigerator during that era. It was nothing but Tecate. Like literally every shelf, the door, some in the freezer too, just in case.
I mean, I do tell everyone, like, I have very romantic feelings about every Friday night, starting the night at one of our places with a box of Tecate and ending it with it empty and the box over Chris's head.
Yep. Box.
Every single picture of us from like 2012 to 2014, there's Tecate and cheap IKEA furniture in the frame somewhere. It's very nostalgic, but it's also like, geez, gosh, we were living like that?
And we were so happy. We were never happier. We never had it so good.
Happiest time of my life, and I would never go back to it.
Never. Oh, God, no. No, thank God. And I want to be clear for the listeners at home who thought like, oh, what they're describing is they would go over to someone's apartment to pregame and then hopefully go out someplace else. No, that's not what was happening. We went over to someone's apartment, drank a box of Tecate, stumbled home the next morning. It was great. It was good.
Do you mind if I lead us into our conversation about comics a little bit? It's a little bit of a sin that our first episode was Catwoman, and Isaac has drawn on Catwoman.
Oh.
A great, one probably. I don't want to rank all of Isaac's comics here, but A Catwoman Tale, Under the Moon, is probably one of my favorite things that Isaac has worked on. And it's kind of a sin that we didn't have him on to talk about Catwoman in our first episode.
He's too close to the source material. He would have been no help whatsoever.
Was that was a really great save, James. Yeah, because it makes no sense that you would bring me on for a Marvel movie.
I was going to ask, have you professionally drawn Marvel yet?
No, nothing. Not one thing.
You haven't worked for Marvel. However, you know a lot about the Fantastic Four. And for the past week, I've just been texting you things like, does the Thing, Ben Grimm, poop rocks? And then almost immediately you sent me a panel back that explains like how his digestive system works and like how, like you answered it like almost immediately. You know a lot about Fantastic Four. And this is the interesting thing about your knowledge is you know exactly where this movie came from. Ultimates. What give me the proper title of what this is based? Fantastic Four Ultimate or Ultimate Fantastic Four?
It's Ultimate Fantastic Four, but they're the ultimate line of comics, which I was reading when we were all living together. The ultimate line of comics was an imprint at Marvel. The idea being, we're gonna strip away all the continuity and reboot these characters in the modern era. So what does it look like if these characters got their powers in today's world? And so it's just like these very, very clever reboots trying to get new readers in the door at comics like me. And it worked, So there was Ultimate Spider-Man, that was the opening salvo, and Ultimate X-Men, written by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar, respectively, drawn by Mark Bagley and Adam Kubert, and then they would expand the line over to the Ultimates, which was, it should have just been called the Ultimate Avengers, and Ultimate Fantastic Four. And there is a direct through line from the Ultimate Universe to every single modern era Marvel movie, including and especially the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire movies and Fantastic. So there you go.
Wow.
Wait, can we pause really quick? You think the Sam Raimi movies bear the hallmarks of the Ultimate line? I don't think I've ever actually heard that connection.
Yeah, so, like, here's the thing. So Sam Raimi very famously despised all modern era comics. So like when he was like assigned to include Venom, he was like, I don't have a way in with Venom. It was like way after my time. I don't care about no Venom, but he loved the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko stuff. However, there's a great behind-the-scenes photo of Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire on set poring over issue #1 of Ultimate Spider-Man, right?
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
It's
I guess
very cool.
I can see the connection there. Like, I'm remembering, because Isaac and I think, both owned at one point in our youth Ultimate Spider-Man #1. I have since lost my copy, unfortunately. But I do remember the high school scenes feeling very much like the Sam Raimi movie. And that's something that I don't think you would really get from the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko one, where he's like, does everyone want to go to the science experiment? And they're like, shut up, Parker. Stay away from a...
I know, it's so silly. Like, a lot of those, like, early campy 60s comics are just, like, unrelatable. They had to, because, like, the thing about comics is that it's a shifting timeline. Everybody knows this. But you got to get rid of, like, the Fantastic Four. The original Stan Lee origin story is they got to beat the commies to space, so they steal a spacecraft and they're all like 40 years old, because Stan Lee was like 40 when he wrote that comic, you know.
Right.
So they had to beat the commies to space, and that just doesn't work in today's era. So the new origin that they rebooted for the Ultimate line, that way makes way more sense, and that's what they eventually used for Fantastic. But the impact of Ultimate Spider-Man is hard to be overstated, and I don't think that you get the Marvel Cinematic Universe without Brian Michael Bendis and Ultimate Spider-Man. Not to mention that Bendis was in those creative summit rooms for the original, like, Avengers Phase 1 MCU movies, which I think, James, you know. Yeah. So like, all that stuff is extremely important. Like, even if Sam Raimi wasn't like, we're adapting Ultimate Spider-Man, like, he was aware of what they were doing in comics at the time, because there was a buzz, there was heat, you know, like, and it was like a slow burn. And then Bendis would eventually stick around with Ultimate Spider-Man for 100+ issues with Mark Bagley. Mark Bagley drew up until issue 110. I think Bendis was on to like 150 plus crossovers and events. But Mark Bagley and Bendis did 110 issues together, which is the record for most issues drawn by a single team, only besting, you guessed it, Fantastic Four by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee with 100 issues from that original series.
If I may direct our conversation a little bit, so there are many things in common between the movie Fantastic and the comic that you've been talking about. And I think the most basic thing that they have in common is that the Fantastic Four is young. You mentioned that when was it Stan Lee and Jack Kirby? Who's the creator of Fantastic Four? Remind me.
Stan Lee, Jack Kirby.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So when they first were writing it, they were in the Fantastic Four were in their 40s. But now in this comic and also in Fantastic, they're like in high school. It starts out when they're like kids. That's also in the comic, right? That's what the movie was pulling from?
Yeah, so, you know, it's really interesting. So, like, to back up just a little bit, it does make, like, if I were a Hollywood executive and anyone was, we would all go like, yeah, the common denominator between all this stuff is the Ultimate version of the characters, and then box office success. And you saw it with Spider-Man, you saw it with the Avengers. And so with the ultimate version of Fantastic Four, the clever modernized reboot is that they're kids, that they were discovered when they were young, when they were prodigies, and they're brought over into a think tank, essentially. And that's where Reed Richards and Victor, he's called Victor Van Dam in the comic, they meet in this think tank developing weapons and tools for the U.S. government, which is interesting. And that's a Mark Millar hallmark. So let me give you a little bit of history as to where this book came from. So Brian Michael Bendis, we're talking about like the massive, like influential success of Ultimate Spider-Man. And then Bendis would later be given the keys to the castle. He's doing like all this stuff with the 616 Prime universe. He creates Jessica Jones. He's got the seminal run on Daredevil. And then Mark Millar is brought over, and he's got a lot of heat on him from The Authority over at Wildstorm Comics, which would later be absorbed into DC Comics. But Wildstorm and The Authority is essentially the Justice League if they were fascist assholes, right? And so Joe Quesada, who's the editor-in-chief of Marvel at the time, and Marvel, by the way, is barreling towards ruin and failure, and that's why to bring it and connect this into Fanforstic again, that is where in the 90s, Marvel's in financial ruin. They lost their top 7 creators over to Image Comics. It's one bad year after another. They double down on the speculator boom. There's issues with the direct market. There are all these rumors that they're going to sell Captain America to DC Comics. And what is true is that they have to sell the movie rights. So to tie this back into Fanforstic, they sell the movie rights to Fantastic Four over to Fox. And I think part of the deal is they have to make a Fantastic Four movie every 10 years, I believe, or the movie rights are going to relapse back to Marvel. And that's part of the reason why they rushed the shit out of Fanforstic, because there was this question, are we going to do a third movie of this campy, silly, almost juvenile Tim Story version of Fantastic Four, or do we reboot it to keep it in line with the more modern era of the serious takes? And what's really hot right now is the Dark Knight Returns, and we want to have a dark tone to differentiate ourselves from the Avengers. I imagine that a lot of this is speculation, but I imagine that's part of the thinking with the reboot of Fanforstic and bringing on Josh Trank. So they're looking around to see what they're going to adapt. They don't want to do the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby stuff, which they did for the campy 2004 movie, which, by the way, side note, I just rewatched, and in preparation for this, I kind of liked them. Like, they were kind of a good time. Like, at the very least, those actors are having a great time, and that's like infectious. And that's in stark contrast to Fanforstic, where everyone just looks kind of miserable being on set. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. I really want to touch on the Tim Story movies, because we were texting a little bit, Isaac and I, about just how bland and like not great Doctor Doom is in those early 2000s and 2007 Tim Story movies. Like it just doesn't make any sense. He's a businessman, and his big corporate headquarters is just covered in decorations with rivets. Like they're leaning into all the like aesthetic things of Doctor Doom, but according to Isaac, there's like no shred of Doctor Doom actually in the character. He's basically Dr. Claw from the live action Inspector Gadget movie. Like, he's just like generic bad guy. Isaac needs to give me like a pure actual comic that explains to me who Doctor Doom is, because most of my knowledge of Doctor Doom comes from the Doctor Doom's Fearfall ride, which is at Universal Islands of Adventure, I think. And the plot of that ride, which is just a very basic drop ride, is he's collecting fear energy for Latveria. And there's like the line going into the ride is like, the line going into the ride has like so much world building, like, welcome to the Latverian, Research Institute. We're here to like figure out things about fear energy. There's like so much setup. And it's basically just a ride that brings you, 100 feet in the air and drops you. That's it. But they themed it so heavily. It's kind of cool. But can Who is Doctor Doom? Like, what is he actually supposed to be?
I mean, he's definitely...
Hold on, Isaac, before you get into that, I want everyone to know that when Kris rode the ride, he takes the story very seriously, and he didn't let Dr. Doom know he was scared at all. And they could tell that he was the most special rider on the ride, because then a guy dressed as Dr. Doom comes out, and he kneels before Kris and goes, "I could not break you." And it's really, it's beautiful.
That's another parallel multiverse dimension where Kris saves Latveria from Dr. Doom.
Yeah, and now you are king of Latveria now.
Yeah. And before I tell you about Dr. Doom, let me tell you about my favorite. Oh, Kris, I was so excited to tell you this. This piece of trivia is so up your alley, and it connects to everything. So because we're on the topic of Islands of Adventure and Superhero Island, those big old like Wolverine and the X-Men, all that stuff, that is drawn by Adam Kubert. Adam Kubert is the artist of Ultimate Fantastic Four, which was then adapted into Fanforstic. And this is the coolest part of it. If you go, and they're still up today, if you go, you can find Adam Kubert's signature hidden in every single one of those drawings. And
really?
Yeah,
Super cool.
And I think he hid his name Adam in like Wolverine's like arm hair or something. Like, you gotta really look for it, yeah.
So Victor Von Doom in the Tim Story movies, he's just a bland corporate president, right? And so in this Fanforstic, he's kind of an angry teenager. I believe in the original draft when they shot it, his name was Victor Domashev. Victor Von Doom must have all these other alternate names, because you mentioned one a second ago. Who is Victor Von Doom? Like, what motivates him? Like, I have no idea, because I've never gotten this straight story.
So the origin story that is kind of treated as the Bible for this character is not even the first appearance of Dr. Doom, which is issue like 5 of Fantastic Four. It's actually the second annual, which was done in 1964. So that's where Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and I would be really interested to know, and we'll never know, unfortunately, but I'd be really interested to know how much of the ideas were from Jack Kirby and how many were from Stan Lee, because it is a great origin story. As a kid, he is in Latveria, which is the fictional place that Dr. Doom eventually becomes the leader of. And he's a little boy in a Romani tribe, and they're just harassed and beaten and taken advantage of constantly by the Baron and all of his people. And so his mother, who learns about dark magic, or maybe she's like born with the power to perform dark magic, she tries to defend her tribe and accidentally murders a bunch of innocent children. So when she's killed by the Baron's people, she's being tortured by the devil for the rest of eternity. The devil in the Marvel Universe is Mephisto, right? So Dr. Doom's origin is him trying to save his mother from being tortured for all eternity. That's his supervillain origin story. And so he starts, as a kid, he starts getting really into sorcery, but also technology. And the thing that's so cool about Dr. Doom is, and you know, there's like an adventure where he goes to Tibet. All these superheroes, they go to Tibet and they learn, they get their third eye and learn about magic and all that kind of stuff. Right.
He ran into Doctor Strange while he was there. Like, he was leaving the Ancient One, and Doom was moving in. It's like, oh,
okay,
hey,
I know you're joking, but that's canon. That does
yeah, of
happen.
course. I mean, they were in the same country. They had to be.
But actually, it's really cool. Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, they team up to save Doctor Doom's mother in hell. So they go to hell together. It's a real, and it's drawn by Mike Mignola pre-Hellboy days, actually. Very cool. But that's besides the point. So Dr. Doom is actually found by the government in Latveria, and they go to Latveria and they say, hey, we want you to come over to this school, whatever, Harvard or whatever, and start develop, like, we'll give you all the resources to develop your experiments and projects further. And that's where he meets Reed Richards. And the reason why Dr. Doom hates Reed Richards, every movie version, he's just jealous of Reed and in love with Sue. That's so reductive. In the comics, it's so much cooler. The reason why he hates Reed is because he's using all of these college resources to go to hell to save his mother. And so he has this big chair, and it explodes. as he's about to save his mother, it explodes, and that's what disfigures his face. And he can't get back into hell to save his mother anymore. And he believes that it was because Reed Richards futzed with his formulas at the last second.
Oh.
So that's the origin story, and that's the rivalry between the two characters. And then Doom goes back to bed. He gets his outfit that we all know that's so iconic. Like, even if you don't read the comics, you know Doctor Doom because that character made its way into popular culture lexicon and the cultural zeitgeist. And he goes back to Latveria and battle by battle usurping the Baron of Latveria and becoming the king of Doomstadt. You know, it's awesome.
It's so awesome.
So cool.
Isaac, you forgot one scene though. So the chair blows up, right? And he's horribly disfigured. And, you know, he's on the ground, fists waving in the air, Richards! And then he goes back to his dorm where his roommate is Reed Richards, and he gets back and there's a sock on the doorknob. So he can't even go inside. Then he goes back to Latveria because he has nowhere else to go.
You know, I will say also, I'm just so bummed out because now it looks like Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doom, which just makes me think that we're just never going to get that origin story in the movies at all. Because you got Doom in the Roger Corman movie, which obviously doesn't count. And then Tim Story, both movies have Dr. Doom. And now it's going to be Robert Downey Jr. It's just such a bummer because I do love that story.
Maybe this is a good place to talk about like the actual movie itself, because I think the difficulty with every single version of this, and I haven't seen, by the way, the latest Marvel Fantastic Four, which from what I understand is considered better, an improvement, in every way. But it is so hard to get this origin story going, you have 4 main characters plus a pretty, major antagonist. Every single one of them has personal stakes and dilemmas that if you just focused on one of those, then that would be enough for a whole movie. And Isaac, you pitching the Doom story right now, incredible. But okay, so if we want to do that, do we start with a prologue of Richards and Doom in college together, and the accident happens, and then we go to Richards who, picks himself up from that and now is on top of the world, as a scientist, and he's headed into space, and that's when we meet the other characters. And then, around the first act break, we understand that Doom re-enters the picture. And it's that is a, perfectly fine, way into that story, but it's not going to give you the nuance that you're talking about, all the stuff with Doom in Latveria and his mom and things like that. It'll honestly, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it'll feel sort of like the Green Goblin origin in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. It's you're hitting the major beats, but it's not exactly subtle.
I do want to bring it back to Ultimate Fantastic Four. Are you guys ready to hear about the similarities with that and Josh Trank's version?
Of course.
Please.
In Ultimate Fantastic Four, the 2 golden boys at Marvel at this time are Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar. I love Mark Millar because, when he's at the height of his powers, you get the Ultimates, which is Ultimate Avengers, and Civil War and Old Man Logan, all of which got an adaptation some way or another. But, and when you take big swings and big risks, sometimes it pays off and you do some of the best work that in the history of the medium. But other times you just he's I got another idea. What if superheroes raped each other? And everyone's it's why can't you just fucking be normal for a fucking day? Can you just fucking relax? He's such a psycho. And definitely cut the, leave this shit in. And Mark Millar, if you're listening to this podcast, please hire me and give me some of that Netflix money. I think it'll be really great for all of us. But anyway, so that's who Mark Millar is. And he's got great success with Civil War and all the stuff that he's doing at Marvel. And I don't know if this is true, but I heard somewhere that originally Ultimate Fantastic Four was supposed to be written by Grant Morrison.
Oh, wow.
But they lost him because he signed an exclusive contract to DC Comics. And I think maybe some of the initial concepts were his. Because they lost Grant Morrison, which again I'm not sure about. They gave it to the Golden Boys, Mark Millar and Bendis, and I believe the delineation was that they would play to their strengths too, and have Millar handle the plotting and Bendis handle the characterization and dialogue. So that's what they did, and that first arc is remarkably similar to Fanforstic. Structurally, story point wise, it's almost one-to-one.
Wow, really?
Especially for the first
Now,
half.
Isaac, that relationship you just described there, one person handles the big plot beats, the other person handles dialogue and characterization. That is similar to the Jack Kirby, Stan Lee way of doing things, right? Like Stan was the big idea man, and I guess there's some question of like how much Jack also, was part of that conversation too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be very, very curious to see to learn what it was like to co-write this book, because Mark Millar and Bendis, they lived on different continents, So like Millar, I believe, was in Scotland at the time, and Bendis is in Portland, Oregon. So, like the time difference alone makes that like near impossible, right? But yeah, that was kind of the idea. I mean, I think really what they wanted, I can imagine the editorial meeting before they started on the project and just being like, we want a guaranteed return on this on this book. Let's just hire the two biggest writers that we got in their stable. So, like, it opens with a young Reed Richards, getting bullied. He's got a really difficult home life, and he's protected by Ben Grimm. And then it goes on to the science fair, where in the comic he's discovered by Willie Lumpkin. In the movie he's discovered by Franklin Richards Sr. And Willie Lumpkin, by the way, in the 616 universe is the Baxter Building mailman. Right. And and Willie Lumpkin is created by Stan Lee and Dan DeCarlo pre-superhero days. Dan DeCarlo would later go on to establish the look for all the Archie comics, so he's got a very iconic stuff. And I guess Stan Lee that's just like a little Ultimate Universe Easter egg paying homage to Willie Lumpkin. So Willie Lumpkin discovers him, brings him in to develop the teleportation device further, and there are like visual similarities even. But then they're taken into the think tank with all the other child prodigies, and that's where Reed Richards and Victor Van Dam in the comics meet. And they have the big teleportation device when they're older. I believe they're around 20 at this point. And Victor Van Dam messes with the formulas at the last second, kind of inverting the relationship in the 616 universe. And they're sucked into space, essentially, into the negative zone. I think they call it something different in Fanforstic. And when they come back, when they're in the dimension getting their powers, it's horrific, and the way Adam Kubert draws it is so scary. And you can imagine Josh Trank reading this comic and going, "Oh my God, this is where the juice is. This is incredible." Because Reed Richards, when he's teleported back to Earth, he looks so scary. He looks like an alien. They open fire on him immediately, and he's near invincible, and it's a horrifying scene. And there's this amazing panel with a really weird angle where Adam Kubert draws Johnny Storm just bursting out into flames, and they adapt that almost like one-to-one directly for the movie. It's really, really cool. And so all that stuff, but like, I'm not one of those guys to say, and I know that you wouldn't necessarily know this just based on everything I've said up until this point, but I don't mind changes for the movies, Right. Like, you have to do that. It's just such a bummer when you read the source material and it's like, oh, this is how you do it right. And you have the blueprint. You have everything there, because Ultimate Fantastic Four, in my estimation, is a perfect comic book. It's not just a good comic book, it's a masterclass in storytelling, which now would be a good time to tell you a little bit about the art. Can I go into this?
Please.
All right, so I've been working in comics for over a decade, and I've read a lot of reviews. And I've read reviews about my work. I've read reviews about other people's work. One thing that that reviewers never focus on is the art, and especially the art of storytelling, which the artists of Ultimate Fantastic Four and Islands of Adventure Sandy's, Adam Kubert is an absolute genius of. So Adam Kubert, of course, the son of the legendary Joe Kubert of Thor and Sergeant Rock fame. He's one of the architects of the modern superhero comic, up there with Jack Kirby and Will Eisner. So Adam Kubert, whose brother is Andy Kubert, and I've worked with Katie Kubert, and when I was in LA Comic-Con and I saw you, James, a couple of weeks ago, my table is right next to Emma Kubert, who's about to start a big book with Frank Miller. Like,
what a dynasty of talent. Incredible.
Yeah. There are 1,000 Kuberts. They all work in comics, you know, and they're all remarkable, and they all are like insanely talented creators in their own right. So all with like, no one looks the same, by the way. They all have their own point of view. It's really remarkable. It's not like they're all clones of each other either.
Wow.
But to back up a little bit, so the Ultimate Fantastic Four costumes and character designs are all done by Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch was so hot off of Ultimates, and Hitch really brought in this realistic approach to comic book visual storytelling, and he had like this Michael Bay epic scope with big explosions, and the scale was always insanely large, but then he also had this big emphasis on anatomy and realism. And all the Marvel movies, the MCU especially, have taken note from Brian Hitch. Like, you can absolutely see his influence on everything that the movies are doing up until this day. And so, like, everything that Hitch did was like zippers everywhere and ribbed sides, and he moved away from spandex, and he was drawing every lace in Captain America's boot, and everything was just hyper detailed. And whenever there's a big new artist that everyone loves, now everyone is drawing in that style. So everyone is aping Brian Hitch, and with good reason. And so is I, by the way. And to this day, he's still like an A-list person. So he does all the character designs. Again, I think it's just to get more eyes on the book, because there's no reason why Adam Kubert couldn't design all the characters as well or better. You know, Adam Kubert is like this huge guy in the 90s, but he has a very different approach to Ultimate Fantastic Four. He's got like a more old school approach, you know, which would make sense considering who his father is and the fact that he was one of the biggest Wolverine and X-Men artists back in the day.
There's a moment in Fant Four Stick that, I don't know, as I was watching it, I kind of wrote it off because this movie is directionless and not very good. But maybe it came from the comic. You tell me. The moment where after Ben Grimm is turned into the Thing, he's like a pile of rocks in the government facility. And when he sees Reed for the first time, he like reaches out in pain. And you see for the first time, like this pile of rocks, just through his like desire to reach out for his friend, the rocks become a hand. Like, it's the first time that, like, this character goes from, like, a transformed pile of rocks to whatever's inside of him is creating, you know, his quote-unquote humanoid body. And it looks like he's in, like, terrific pain as he reaches out and he forms a hand with his rocks. Is that also in the comic?
Well, not really. But the imagery is very similar to Ultimate Fantastic Four. So the imagery is similar and the tone is similar. But that reaching out in the pile of rocks forming a hand, that's got to be a Josh Trank original. However, there is what you're talking about in that scene in particular does remind me of a scene later on in Ultimate Fantastic Four. And this is during, I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's the Mark Millar, Greg Land era of the title, where Johnny Storm's been like kind of making fun of the Thing and embarrassing him and pulling pranks on him left and right, and the Thing becomes very depressed, and so Johnny goes to apologize to him, and the Thing says, he's like crying, he's sad, he's sitting on a bench in a park alone, and he says, I've just been really low lately and I can't stop thinking about killing myself, and obviously Reed has given up on trying to cure me. He's focusing on other things. But do you think Reed would help me kill myself because I don't want to be here anymore? I mean, and that is a remarkable, that is unbelievably like just reading that in a comic is wild, but that's like a very mature, very heavy take on these characters, which again is the established tone in the comics, which they do very well, that Josh Trank just got lit up by, and so am I. You could probably hear in my tone, like I was just amazed and stunned by that dialogue in that moment, and I can absolutely imagine like all the people over on the movie side of things going like, there's some real juice in this,
Right.
Why does it work well in the comics, and why doesn't it just work in the movie? Because it's close, as you said, Isaac. Like if not 1-to-1, like tonally kind of in the same area. I think I know why, but I'd be curious to hear your comic book expertise as to why does it work in panels and not necessarily in frames.
My initial gut response is just that you have way more time to really develop these characters. But you talk for a while. What do you think?
Well, I think, and I haven't read the comics, so I can't really comment on this. Like Kris and I talked a little bit about this in our separate conversation. There's this weird, they try to do this like Spielbergian sort of like start to the movie where like Reed has this thing at his house that he's like developing, and Ben Grimm comes over and they turn, they blow the circuit and like power goes out across the entire neighborhood. And it's like stuff like that feels so just like familiar and stuff we've seen before, and we've seen it.
That's in Ultimate Fantastic Four.
Is that in Ultimate?
Well.
So okay, so this is why it's interesting. Okay, I don't know. It's like I see it in a movie and I kind of groan. Or I don't groan, but I'm like, oh, this is a movie for children now. Because there's nothing I hate more than seeing a bunch of twerpy kids ruin an entire, electrical grid for people who are just trying to, at that time watch the finale of The Sopranos or whatever. Very, very annoying. So I understand that it's like shorthand for like, oh, look, that, these guys are onto something big and this is the powerful stuff that they're dealing with. But like part of me is also just like, get to it already. So I don't know. Maybe there is something just about the medium of you're looking at a comic book, you can make the voices and everything you see on the page, you can make that make sense in your head so that it is a compelling moment and not a like predictable one, which is how this movie feels, especially in the beginning. Like predictable, let's get to it. Yeah,
it's an interactive medium. Like as a reader in a comic book, you're bringing in a lot of pacing and sound in your head, like it's interactive, it's a relationship. It's whereas like a movie is very passive, you're a passive spectator, like everything is being shown to you. So but yeah, in between each panel you're filling in those gaps, of movement and pacing, all that stuff.
I think I mentioned this in our conversation, James and I's conversation, but I watched the 1994, I believe, the Roger Corman Fantastic Four, and it sounds like they're saying exactly what's in their speech bubbles, and it does not work. All the dialogue feels just like cardboard and wooden, and like it doesn't work at all. But this movie, it seems to go in like the complete opposite direction, where I read somewhere, I think in IMDb trivia, that Josh Trank was telling Miles Teller and Kate Mara like when to breathe and like how to act so that he could get the very specific dry, not Christopher Nolan, but that desaturated tone that he was going for. Let me ask you a question, because we were talking about Victor Von Doom and Sue Storm and the love triangle with Reed Richards, and they like basically put that in this movie in like one shot, where Victor Von Doom walks in, sees that Sue and Reed are like having a good time together, and it just cuts back to him and he has like a displeased look, and they do nothing else with that storyline. We were talking about, there's so much backstory to get through in all these, characters. What is Sue Storm's deal in the comic? Because the movie gives her almost nothing. Like she is like barely in the movie. what is their deal? We have a lot of information about Reed and Victor Von Doom. We have some stuff about Ben Grimm and how he's protecting Reed. But like, what is Sue's deal in the comic? Why did they leave all that out in the movie?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm so like confused. Like I really do feel like she's just there to give Dr. Doom a little bit of motivation, you know?
Right.
Because, I'm sure they tried it out in the comics, and I just didn't read the series. But the version of Dr. Doom that I followed, he's never in love with Sue Storm. It just feels like for the movie, it's just like a shortcut for the audience to go like, oh, okay, I get it. Now I understand the motivation. Because like Dr. Doom is like almost like asexual. Like he's so singularly in the comics. He's so singularly focused on saving his mother. He doesn't have time for women or anything, you know?
It is a fascinating backstory for a character that, just hearing you talk about it, it's like, I would have loved to see this in a movie of a character who comes from just a world that is nothing like a think tank. Like it makes sense that Reed Richards ends up in there. He's turning off the power to the neighborhood. I'm sorry I keep like harping on this, but like, he is a guy that even though he comes from like a family that doesn't care about him and like lower class means, it still makes sense that he's at the science fair that gets him into this think tank. Like, as much as we know about the Toby Kebbell version of Dr. Doom here, he's like a gamer, it looks like. It looks like the first time you see him, he's in like a gaming chair with like a headset or whatever. Like, there's so much to be gotten from like a guy who literally is coming from a war-torn country, who is part of a tribe, like all this stuff that just you wouldn't think that this is where this character would end up. And it could give you such empathy for a character who, as you said, Isaac, is driven for one thing. Now, even if like we made the love triangle that doesn't exist in the movie between Reed, Sue, and Vicky there, if you made that work, like it's just like it's so clear Sue has to choose between what she knows, Reed, and the world of science versus the mysterious and powerful world that Doom comes from. And, even like the black magic angle is kind of interesting too. All of that would have just injected this setup, the Josh Trank setup, with so much more like just stuff to be interested in and just not be like, okay, what's the next scene? What's the next scene?
Yeah, well, in the Josh Trank version, like he sets up Dr. Doom as basically an incel, right? Like you said, he's introduced as a gamer.
Was that word around in 2015? When did incel?
I don't know. But he is like kind of like an incel icon in this movie, is he? Because he's like starts off as a gamer, he's in love with Sue, he's rejected, and so he wants to destroy the world.
Yep, that's a natural reaction to such things.
Yeah, it's just like, and they do, by the way, the same thing, but the businessman version of it in the early 2000s movies.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh, okay, so Dr. Doom's an incel. But in the comics, like you said, he's just got this gravitas to him, and yes, it's comic booky and it can be silly, and maybe that's what's making Hollywood get cold feet about him. But if done right, like he's mysterious and scary and intimidating and exciting, and nuanced, like you said. So, you got to really love the source material, I think, to do it right.
I'm kind of on Josh Trank's side now that I've listened to you, Isaac, talk about the comic. Like that, if they had just committed to the vision of the Ultimate Comics, it would have been a little bit darker, maybe more depressing. But gosh, the concept of people transforming and not knowing what's happening to their bodies, there is a lot of ripe ground for something really deep and, something that gets to you. Whereas we have to remember that all this stuff came from the 60s and it was just like, the most basic superhero stories you could imagine starting out. And now it's gone to this like Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan territory of our hearts are being torn in two because of our superpowers. That's very interesting.
But in the defense, and not really a huge defense, of the studio that made the Fantastic, they're reintroducing characters that the last time they were on screen were these campy characters, and those movies were financially successful, right? Because they made two of them. And now in 2015, though, we've gotten through, I mean, how many Marvel movies? Like the Avengers has come out in like 2012, right? And side note, remember when we all saw that at the Vista in Los Feliz? Oh, that was amazing. We got there so early to make sure that we got a ticket. That was
just
great.
real quick.
Yeah.
The Avengers was such a big deal at the time. I was a production assistant, and I remember my boss, a coordinator, had his background as like all the Avengers characters. It was just like everyone was so hyped for it. Comic book movie.
Yeah,
that was a big time in comic book movies.
And also, too, there were people who had never read a comic book before telling Isaac, like, hey, did you know all these characters are going to be in the same movie? I guess they know each other. And Isaac, just foaming at the mouth and, like, holding them down and explaining the history of...
just shouting, Brian Michael... Brian Michael Bendis and Marvel. I can't take it anymore.
These aren't even the original iterations. Brian Michael Bendis saved Marvel and Toy Biz the 90s. Avi Arad. Okay, but what I was saying, I think what I was saying, though, is that, okay, so the Marvel Universe has proven that the formula works. Everyone who's coming to like, oh, there's going to be a Fantastic Four movie, they're probably even wondering like, oh, we're not getting 4 individual movies like introducing these characters before they all come together. Like the formula had changed so much of what like audience expectations were for superhero movies. And yes, Christopher Nolan was doing his thing with the Batman movies, which are of their own world. And it's like, okay, we need to make the most crowd-pleasing movie possible with a very talented filmmaker who made a very cool take on the superhero movie, a very singular vision like take on that with Chronicle. So now we're asking him to pretty much do the same thing with Fantastic Four, except we don't want a singular take. We want to play it safe and make a traditional movie that introduces these characters that can then be spun off into a franchise, an even bigger franchise.
Well, they also, you guys probably know this, right? But the studio was cutting costs, and lowering the budget left and right. Like there were these. And apparently you can find footage of this online, but they started filming action scenes and then they had to remove them from the movie.
You're right. Let me ask you a question, because a lot of those cut action scenes, I believe, had to do with Ben Grimm working for the government. Like you see these cool previs reels of the Thing, working with the army and flipping over tanks and stuff. Did Ben Grimm, the Thing, work for the government in the Ultimate comic?
No, man. And that's the biggest bummer of the movie for me, is just seeing Ben Grimm fighting people, and it's just confirmed kills. 37. It's just oh man, dude.
Confirmed clobbers. Confirmed clobbers.
Yeah, confirmed. That would have made it way better if it was confirmed clobbers.
And I'm sorry, there was a scene missing that they must have filmed where Chet Hanks, who plays Ben Grimm's older brother and says it's clobbering time in the opening 5 minutes, he's still in the junkyard being an asshole, and then out of nowhere the wall falls down and there is the silhouette of Ben Grimm and he goes, oh, now it's clobbering time. And then it cuts to Chet Hanks's funeral and they get Tom to deliver a eulogy, and it's very touching for everyone.
While we're on this subject, so Isaac apparently does not like the Thing working for the government. That does not work for Isaac. Isaac, we talked about this in the discussion with James and I. What do you think of recontextualizing the origin of It's Clobbering Time in a moment of childhood trauma as depicted in Fant Four Stick? What do you think of that?
What a giant bummer. What a huge bummer to just
yeah, it is.
To have an action figure that when you press the button it goes, it's clobbering time, and then now I think of, and now it's connected to child abuse. There's a way to do everything. It's just about execution, and this execution is just Bummerville, USA. But if we had this podcast a year ago, I would have said, and I never reread Ultimate Fantastic Four, I would have said Fantastic Four, you have to keep it light, you have to keep it fun. Like, you can't do a dark take on it. But now, because of this podcast and you guys, it's actually really cool, and I really mean this. Like, I started rereading Ultimate Fantastic Four, and I've just been reading Fantastic Four comics for the past 2 weeks, almost incessantly. And I'm like falling in love with comics in a way that I haven't felt since the early 2000s.
Aww,
and that's true.
Awesome.
It's absolutely true, you know, because, you know, you work in comics for so long. I remember just being so disappointed when comic creators I admired would say this, but they would say like, oh, I work in comics for 12 hours a day. The last thing I want to do when I'm done is read a comic book. And now I'm one of those jaded guys. But because of this, I'm reading Ultimate Fantastic Four, and I'm seeing this greatness again, and I'm seeing, to your point, Kris, a dark take on Fantastic Four, and I'm going, it does work. You can do this, and I can't believe how wrong I was. Because in the 10 years between Ultimate Fantastic Four and Fant4stic, I forgot how much they lifted from that title. And then in the years from Fant4stic to now, I forgot about that movie, you know? But you can do it. And like going outside of comics, James, your sister will appreciate this, but Trixie Mattel, Trixie is one of the most famous drag queens in the world. And like her name, Trixie, comes from her stepfather making fun of her and calling her Trixie. And she's like, all right, well, I'm going to reclaim that. There's a way to
do the reclamation of it, totally.
Yeah, the reclamation, but boy, did Josh Trank miss the mark.
Well, no, but I can tell you how he should have done it. There should be a thing action figure that like a little kid is playing with, right? And you just hear the voice box go, it's clobbering time. Camera pans over to show that Ben Grimm is observing the scene. Slow push in on his little rock eye as "Hello, darkness, my old friend" fades in, and we go into a sepia tone flashback.
Yikes. Yikes.
Oh, no. James, all of your like your pass on the script is even worse.
Hold on.
So
I'll
glad you
fix
weren't
this.
working on this movie.
Have what I need to fix this.
Fant4stic is a fascinating case study because you don't know who to blame. Like, and I actually feel bad for Josh Trank because and this is the plight of every director. You get all of the credit when it's a success, but you get all the blame when it's a failure. And, you know, I know that you guys know better than most that there are so many other moving parts and factors. But yeah, it's hard to look at that movie and be like, because you have the greatest source material ever. It just stripped away, you just strip away all the juice and all the fun and all the excitement, and that's how you get Fant4stic, you know?
Well, guys, I think we can all agree that whether you're reading a classic Fantastic Four run in the comics or watching Roger Corman's 1995 version, Tim Story's 2005, and Josh Trank's 2015, I think we can all agree Reed Richards is fantastic. Sue can fade from sight. Johnny Storm is the Human Torch. The Thing just loves to fight. Just call the four. Fantastic Four.
Do you guys want to keep singing? I'll just keep listening.
Chris, you didn't harmonize. We ran that so many times. You didn't harmonize.
Wait,
Isaac,
Chris,
I can't.
Can you like edit in the theme song, like to like overlay the cartoon theme song with what James started?
I can, but I refuse to. Isaac, thank you so much for coming on and explaining Fantastic Four to us. We really appreciate it, and we're gonna have to find another comic book movie so we can do this again.
Thank you so much, buddy. Dude, let's just have Isaac on to talk about Spotlight or Schindler's List, or the most uncomic book movie possible.
Guys, this was so fun. Like I was telling Chris, but I kind of made it sound like I've been reading Fantastic Four for a long time. The truth is, I just crammed tons of stories in the past 2 weeks because I was so excited to hang out with you guys.
Well, you don't need a reason to hang out with us. I wish we could do it more often in person, but this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Isaac. This is the new best episode of the podcast by far.